Today we're going to talk about my favorite rereads of 2017 and then delve into my conflicted thoughts on my 2018 reading goals. Alright, as I mentioned in my last video, I reread 6 books in 2017 which got upgraded to the coveted 5-star status that a book can only achieve after multiple reads. Okay, that's a little bit of a lie, as there is a very extremely rare situation where a book can be so perfect it achieves 5 stars in the first read, like Fangirl, but that occurs maybe once every couple of years. It is extremely rare. Typically, a book will get 4 stars max on its first read, which means I loved the book. And then on the second read, I reevaluate and then decide, do I love this book as much as I did on the first read? If so, it gets elevated to 5-star status, which means it's one of my favorite books of all time. Or I might decide that the first read was a product of the time of my life, and now the book doesn't speak quite as much to me, and it might get downgraded to a 3-star, which is a mere like for me. Or I might decide I still love the book, but it is flawed enough that it doesn't deserve a perfect score, and I'll keep it at 4 stars. So, out of all the books that I reread this year, these are the books that got the 5-star rating. Katurah and Lord Death by Martine Leavitt. I have very fond memories of my first read of this. This is the same fairy tale plot as The Bear and the Nightingale, but while The Bear and the Nightingale reads much more like a historical fantasy, Katurah and Lord Death really reads in the style and structure of a fairy tale. In it, Katurah follows a deer into the forest and gets really lost. Death is near, literally, and he happens to be young and pretty handsome, if quite dour. Not really wanting to die, Katurah bribes Lord Death with a story in return for 24 hours more of life. This book's fairy tale style can initially come across as a bit flat, which lulls me into condescension at first every time I read this, and then by the end I'm like, holy crap, that was a lot deeper than the simplicity of the writing would have indicated. This book makes me cry every time and leaves me ruminating on the deeper meaning for weeks after reading this. How to Marry a Rake by Deb Marlowe. Typically, I find my sentiments closely mirror ratings on Goodreads, but this is an exception. I love this book a lot more than the general population, apparently. This was my second reread, and I still loved it as much as the first read. May has been on tour of Europe to mend her heart after her friend Stephen rejected her, and now she's ready to find a husband, but then she bumps back into Stephen and they must work together to find a missing racehorse. While the basic plot might not sound like much, this is a well-formed Regency romance with lovely characters and a diverting side plot. One of my favorite examples of this genre. Brightly Woven by Alexandra Bracken. Before Alexandra Bracken had smashing success as a dystopian author, she wrote one of my favorite YA fantasy books of all time, Brightly Woven. And I know her dystopian is so popular, and this fantasy book was middling successful at best, but it's a damn shame because I love this book so much and I really wish she'd write more in this universe. I went back and reread this book to see if I still loved it as much as I did that first time around, and oh yes, I did. I will admit that I definitely read more critically this time through. Oh, did I miss North's rampant alcoholism in the first round? But I'm still just in love with how Alexandra Bracken writes fantasy and how her characters and their relationships just wrap themselves around you and hold on. Soulless by Gail Carriger, steampunk at its finest. Our heroine, Alexia Terabati, has no soul, which means that when she touches supernatural beings, think vampires and werewolves, they, while in contact with her, become mortal, which, as you would expect, makes supernatural beings terrified of her. Except for Lord Connell Mackin of the Wolsey Pack, and the head of the London Burr office, which investigates all things supernatural. I loved this book even more than the first time I read it. It's just the perfect paranormal romance, and the steampunk / Victorian twist to it just makes it even more perfect, even though neither of those things are currently trendy. This is perfection. Have I mentioned the word perfect yet in this review? Well deserving of 5 out of 5 stars. Graceling by Kristin Cashore. Kat is a Graceling, one of the rare people born with an extreme skill. In this case, hers is killing. She is forced to work as the king's thug. And then there's Prince Ro, a stranger. They will become entangled with each other as she learns the truth behind her grace. This book is perfect. I really did not expect to be quite so in love with it the second time reading it. It just has a unique approach to the genre, to relationships, and to characters. At times, Kat's can come across as somewhat simplistic and single-minded, but that I think is part of her character, not necessarily a design flaw. This book definitely remains in my pantheon of my favorite books ever. The Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery. So this was written back in the 1920s. Valancy is an old maid and she lives with really overbearing relatives. One day she gets a terminal diagnosis from a doctor and decides to live the remainder of her life however the hell she wants. I love this book so much every time I read it. The writing style is like a mashup of Anna Green Gables and Walden's Pond. Warning, it's definitely slower paced than modern books, but I just have such a soft spot for this one. Second warning, the digital edition, at least the Project Gutenberg Australia version, cuts off a couple chapters early, literally at the saddest point possible, which makes it seem like a totally different book, which highly amused me since I've read this book many times before, but if you haven't, it might make you want to hurl your e-reader if this is your first time through. So I've been rereading one of my favorite British mystery series, Lord Peter Wimsey by Dorothy Sayers. This series has a lovable detective. He's a British lord who comes across as rather useless young rich man when you first meet him, but is actually extremely clever at, well, solving crimes. He's one of my favorite characters of all time. I've gotten through rereading the first 5 books so far, and in 2018 I'm going to get to where Harriet Vane shows up, and I am so excited. Harriet Vane is a wonderfully strong and educated female character for having been written in the 1930s. If you like Agatha Christie, you need to read these books. I actually like Dorothy Sayers' writing and plots a bit better than Christie, so try it. Okay, so moving on, I've been trying to figure out what my 2018 reading goal should be. I tried to limit myself to 200 books in 2017 and failed miserably as I ended up at like 243. So the question here is, should I give in to the reality that around 240 seems to be my book equilibrium, or should I try to, you know, get other things in my life done and try to read less in 2018? I think my reasoning here is that I need an achievable goal, so if I set it at 240 and come in under that, whether by 1 book or 10 books, I will feel accomplished. That's my story and I'm sticking to it. So I think the goal in terms of number of books is 240. I also have some other reading goals I want to add into the mix here. Number 1, be quicker to DNF books, which stands for did not finish. I very often fall into the sunk cost fallacy where I'm like, but I already invested 100 pages in this book, I might as well finish the last 300. But if I know the book stinks and I'm not going to enjoy those last 300 pages, I could be reading 300 pages of a book I do enjoy and have a finite amount of life force left within me with which to read books, and I should probably stop wasting it. I'd like to caveat this. It should be only used for books that are just poorly written. If the book is pretty well written and I'm just unsure because the book isn't what I'm used to, those are the books I need to finish, because very often I get to the last page and I'm like, holy cow, it has all become clear now, that's brilliant. And this policy is for those books that are definitely not like that, that are very obviously not well written at all. Number 2, reread more books. Last year I started a reread list that's full of books that got at least 4 stars and were last read more than 5 years ago. I read some, which is where the books we talked about before came from, but I didn't do a great job at actually incorporating that list into my reading rotation on a more regular basis. But there's a real internal struggle that I don't want to go back and visit some of my favorites and then find out that I've changed and that at this time in my life the book just isn't as good as I remember. That really hurts. It hurts. But then I've had some beautiful experiences revisiting beloved books of the past. I think the tiebreaker here is that I do spend a lot of time recommending books to other people, and if I haven't read a book in a very long time, even though I know I loved it then, I probably shouldn't be recommending it because I really can't vouch for the quality of books my 14-year-old self liked. So in 2018, I'm going to soldier through my phobia and reread more books. Number 3, read more little-known/new authors. So I'm defining this as authors who don't have any books in Goodreads that top out at more than 1,000 ratings apiece. I want to support new authors, but I also don't want to accept arcs, because as soon as I accept an arc, I feel A, time pressure, which I hate, and B, I feel weird about giving negative reviews, even though I know I shouldn't, but just something about getting an arc and having the author's attention on me makes me psychologically less likely to give a negative review. So after years of waffling over all this and accepting arcs and then never reading them because the internal conflict was real, I'm just done. I will not accept arcs. My new policy is going to be, if the book looks interesting, I will add it to my little known authors TBR, and we'll get to it when I get to it, which with the size of my TBRs will be long enough that I won't have any residual feelings that will in any way influence my review. The other advantage of this, which might seem like a flaw, but I see as a positive, is that I won't get the books for free. I will pay for them. Books by small-time authors usually are like $3 max, so it's not like it's gonna break the bank, and I get to monetarily support in some small way the work of new authors. So new year, new policy and arcs, and a resolution to actually read more books by new/little-known authors. If you guys know of any authors who fall into the parameters of not having any book on Goodreads that's collected more than 1,000 ratings, let me know, and I will add them to my little-known author TBR. Also, tell me what your reading goals are in the comments below.